get out of here with the lanes. We are all here trying to grow this thing. You need to be able to like switch into different lanes, wear all the hats, do whatever it takes, even if you haven't ever done it before. That's the hard part and the fun part about building early stage startup teams, is like finding people who can actually do that.
Welcome to the Early Podcast, where I interview the builders behind the world's most iconic companies. I'm Max Crowley. I was Uber's 25th employee and spent years scaling one of this generation's wildest rides. Each week, I sit down with the early innovators who really made it all happen. So please, tune in, like the show, subscribe, tell your friends, keep coming back. Let's go.
Alyssa Pollack, welcome to the podcast.
Max Crowley.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, you'll always be Alyssa Wise to me.
Yeah, I know.
So we'll dive in. You were diagnosed with stage 4 cancer as a teenager. You have to deal with, I assume, mortality and everything at a really young age. How did that shape you?
Yeah. When I think back to that time, there's two main things from that experience. But the first is like the day I was diagnosed. The moment, I can remember it like so vividly, was obviously a really hard day. And my mom, who has just been a personal and professional mentor over the years, was like, all right, today we're going to cry and feel sorry for ourselves. Tomorrow, we're not doing that anymore. We're going to like put one foot in front of the other, take action, and survive this thing. That action orientation and the putting one foot in front of the other, even in the face of the hardest challenges, has gone on to be a little bit of a theme in my career, and maybe made me brave enough to go try hard things. I have constantly been trying to figure out like, how can I make my time matter and like do something that matters?
Well, your mom is awesome.
Yeah,
I
she
might
is.
need to pump up from her at some point.
I can give you her phone number.
Yes. All right. So after college, you do a stint at Walgreens, which is like big corporate company. Then you're at The Onion, which is like a satirical, I imagine, upstarty, crazy fest.
Yep.
How do you balance that time, and what were your sort of takeaways from the two sort of disparate experiences?
Walgreens was big and slow and like completely devoid of any type of passion. You know, people weren't showing up at Walgreens like, yes, I'm so excited to come and do my job today. They were like, all right, I'm here. It's 9 a.m. When does 5 p.m. roll around? What all do I need to do between now and then? I just realized I had like too much energy and fierceness and passion that was like completely unusable in that setting. So that was a learning from me. This isn't it. So I kind of like took a sharp left turn in the other direction, trying to find my way, and landed at The Onion. I was kind of like the first like finance team member there. It was actually an interesting time because The Onion was shifting from being a print-based business, you know, making most of its revenue on franchise fees and print ads, to kind of like embracing the digital era. This was when like digital video content, you know, this was 2011.
At the beginning of Twitter. And
digital video content was taking off. And so we needed to really shift the business model. I was in charge of doing that. I was completely unqualified. I had never done it before. I was like constantly having that feeling of who's the adult in the room here? Who's going to tell me what to do? And they never showed up. It was me. I think that kind of gave me the taste of getting out over my skis. That thrill of like, am I actually going to be able to figure this out? And then figuring it out. It gave me a taste of that. And for that, I'm thankful. You know, it wasn't like a rocket ship company. I just didn't see myself like really building a career at The Onion. I kind of started poking around a little bit more. What The Onion did is it got me into the epicenter of Chicago and kind of like the tech or tech adjacent space. Growing up in the Midwest and then having my first job at Walgreens, I was not really privy to. And it actually, serendipitously, The Onion's office was right across the street. Literally, you could see out the window across to the co-working space that Uber was in.
You saw the drivers lining up already?
Yeah, I was like, I got to get in the mix. So I started kind of looking around for other opportunities, but I knew I wanted to get to a place where I could bring my energy, enthusiasm, passion, kind of fierceness, and that would be embraced. And also maybe do something I had never done before and might not have been like fully qualified to do.
So 2012, you joined Uber. Uber is not a household name at that point by any means. Take me through how you kind of first heard about Uber, you start using it, and then how you got in the mix for the job.
My boyfriend at the time, now husband, was a consultant at Accenture. And he was actually living in New York. We were doing long distance, New York and Chicago. And he was taking Ubers. He was a very early adopter. I think I looked up his customer number one time before we weren't allowed to do that anymore.
for flag security.
Yeah. And he was like 10,000th, number 10,000. I was traveling to see him and he was traveling to see me. He was like, you got to try this out. It's so much better than taxis. I tried it and I was like, well, yeah, this is so much better than taxis. So I would say I was using the product. I think I might have been flagged even as like a power user in Chicago because I was asked to be a beta tester for when the Chicago team, you, Kenny, Alan, put taxis on Uber for the first time. I was like, yeah, I want to try that. I want to try taxis on Uber. Cause I was probably like living a little beyond my means as a 23-year-old, like rolling, up to the airport in a black car. So I was excited about the more cost effective, way to have the Uber experience, but I signed up to beta test and I was like, as I was like writing my feedback, filling out the survey or whatever, saying what I thought, I'm like, wow, I'm like really curious about the inner workings of this company. I love the product. I use it. This seems really interesting. I'm going to go dig a little bit more. And I think that's when I came across the job posting for the driver operations manager role. And I don't know if you remember, but back then, like one of the qualifications on the driver ops job posting was like experience managing fleets of trucks is a plus. And I'm like, well, I definitely don't have that, but I think I can do this job. So I threw my hat in the ring and, went through the interview process and ended up getting in the mix.
I don't think there was one person I know that managed the fleet of trucks.
No.
It started as Uber Black. I mean, everything was high-end luxury, $15 minimum fare, probably twice as much as what a taxi was on average in a city. Very regulated, licensed chauffeur drivers. Then we get into taxis. So we're actually bringing taxis on. With taxis, you can't really control supply and demand. You're lucky if they come on during times of sort of peak demand. Then we sort of start to dip our toes into coming even more downstream, which is UberX. What were your early memories of starting to shift? You start, you get into seat and you're immediately managing licensed chauffeurs and taxis. And then we start to dip our toes in the water of UberX. With
black cars, there was a finite amount of supply in Chicago, right? And we were like probably rounding the corner on having like 80 or 90% of licensed black car drivers on the platform before we dipped into peer-to-peer. It was kind of the long tail of drivers by that time. How do we get the last several drivers? And then we were also trying to get black car drivers to get more cars and put more drivers in cars. And that was how we were going to expand our supply base. We were trying to squeeze the last little bit of juice out of black car supply in Chicago. Then we opened the floodgates with peer-to-peer. Instead of figuring out how do we onboard the next 1 or 2 or 10 black car drivers, we needed to shift everything and figure out how do we onboard 10, 50, 100 UberX drivers. And so that need for like scaled operational processes like kind of flipped overnight. And that was what we were doing every week. We were like, all right, how do we get vehicle inspections? We were inspecting vehicles one by one, having them pull up outside the office. We're marching downstairs, taking pictures of their car with our phones, making sure that their car, had 4 wheels, was reasonably clean, like wasn't all banged
a certain
up.
Age.
Yeah. And making sure that, and we captured the license plate. So that was like a 1-by-1 process, which was our rate limiter for onboarding UberX in the early days. That, and we were like doing in-person interviews with every UberX driver, manually running background checks. Our UberX driver database was a Google sheet at the beginning.
Like most processes in the company until like 2015.
It was work harder and smarter. We were running like 3 in-person group onboarding sessions a day, every single day of the week. 7 days a week. And they would start at 8 a.m. and our last one would be at 9 p.m. at night. And because we needed to work around UberX driver schedules, right? Some of them were baristas during the day. And so when they got off work, we needed them to come in and do their onboarding class and quiz in person. And so it was just more is more. That was kind of the theme. It's like, yeah, we got to come up with these efficiency hacks and we just got to do more of everything. And that's kind of like when the early stage, like grind it out mentality, like run through walls to make this thing work. Like that was when it was happening.
Yeah. I mean, your Friday night was you and Emily at Hubbard Inn. It sounds like.
Yeah. The arc of the week was like, Mondays and Tuesdays, it was like awareness, right? What drivers can we tell about Uber that didn't know about Uber last week? So we would walk the taxi and limo lots at O'Hare Airport with iPhones. Hey drivers, this is an iPhone. That was not a foregone conclusion back then.
For sure.
Like this is a smartphone and it has this one app on it. And I'm going to give you this phone. And when the app beeps, go to the address
with the little man with the hand.
Go to that address. And, we didn't have GPS in it. It was like they knew the city. They had to have enough knowledge to get there. Go to the address, pick the person up, take them to wherever they want to go, and their credit card will be charged. And it was just like what? What is this magic?
You're going to actually pay me?
Yeah. So Monday and Tuesday was like, okay, tell these people about it and get them interested. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday was all about like, okay, how can we onboard as many drivers as possible before the weekend hits? Because the weekend was when our demand spiked. And if we didn't have enough supply for the demand that Max and his team drummed up, we would hear about it.
Yes.
And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it was like hand-to-hand combat. I mean, Emily and I, the first couple driver operations managers, all the drivers had our personal cell phone numbers. And if their app was busted or they lost their phone, that had the Uber app on it, they would call us up and we would be like, all right, here's where we're at. We're at Hubbard Inn, maybe trying to have a drink and unwind after a long week. But nope, like a driver rolls up, we're reprogramming the phone, getting it hooked to their account, getting them back on the road so that we weren't missing out on that next trip that they could do.
Yeah, it was a time where every single action you took really counted. And you go from a time with drivers where you're trying to convince them that this is a platform that they should use to, oh man, I'm so desperate. This is my money making tool. Please bring me back online. And for you guys, I mean, to have the hearts and the brains and everything else to get those folks back on the system. I mean, that was everything in those early days.
Totally. And and making sure they got paid and handling payment issues when those came up, driver support tickets. We had like thousands of tickets coming in each day. The big balance was always making sure we had enough time and focus to get new drivers on, but also making sure that we were supporting the existing driver base. And there was always that tension. How do I spend this next 30 minutes of my week? And it was sort of like, do both.
Do it all.
Do it all. Yeah.
At that time, especially, you're really balancing what is sort of the written regulations of a municipality, of a city, to, hey, we kind of want to develop our own framework. We also believe it's going to be better. That can be a tricky game, but background checks, inspections, all these things. I mean, in some ways that has sort of stayed with you, I feel like, of innovating and continuing to push and regulations or licensed or, how have you thought about that throughout the rest of your career as you've sort of maybe towed that line in a good way?
Yeah. I think it really comes down to digging deeper. If you look at surface level, it's like, oh, well, rules are there for a reason. But then when you kind of dig deeper, it's like, sometimes rules are there because they meet the specific interests of a certain, constituent that has a lot of power or money. And that certainly was the case with kind of in the taxi industry. It was like, these rules and regulations served one party, and that was like the incumbent taxi companies that had a monopoly on the city, transportation in the city, and also on the drivers. The thing that really stuck with me and that kind of gave us fuel to put one foot in front of the other through these regulatory battles was getting to know the drivers and talking to them. You learned they did not have a good relationship with the taxi medallion holders in most cases. It was so lopsided in the power dynamics. Knowing that we were really doing right by both the actual drivers and by riders, like then you're like, okay, I feel good kind of like fighting against whatever friction we might encounter with these regulations. Looking at what I've worked on since then, it's all about what is the best thing for the customer. It always comes back down to that. And if it's like a lot of times right now, it's about democratizing access to something, where there has been power held centrally. Do we still need that central body to hold all the power, or can we democratize access? So with what we're doing with Fellow, it's really about elevating lived experience from peers, helping people who've lived through something difficult, like navigating a cancer diagnosis as a teenager, making their experience available and accessible to someone who might need that guidance as they're navigating this kind of like new uncharted territory. We're in kind of unregulated or pre-regulated space with Fellow. We really believe that we're doing right by both the customer who needs more access to higher quality advice versus getting kind of sucked into internet rabbit holes, and by individuals who have this underutilized asset in their lived experience.
And I'm sure you're already incorporating safety measures, other things to make sure, hey, these people are vetted and it's tracked, and digital technology allows you to do these things that, again, didn't exist pre-2010 or pre-2008, and now you can build into your...
We're going back to what we did at Uber, which is the high touch, the do things that don't scale mentality. With every Fellow that comes on board, that's kind of our supply side at Fellow. They're filling out an application that gets reviewed by a real human. They're doing an interview with a real human on our team. They're doing a background check. We're doing a reference check. So reaching out to other people who can say like, yeah, I'd go to this person for advice on this topic. And then training and an assessment. Of course, there's ways that we can make that more efficient over time with AI, with automation, asynchronous reviews. But right now, that early supply-based quality matters so much that when you're thinking about nurturing that atomic network, the quality of your early supply base matters so much that it's worth doing everything that doesn't scale in the early days to incubate that, and then thinking about how to layer on efficiency over time. So it's interesting because my team or investors will say, well, that's not going to scale. And I'm like, I know, but I also know where we started at Uber, and I've been down this path before. I know there are so many levers that we have to pull and dials that we have to turn that we're going to be able to get this thing to scale. Like scaling the supply base in an efficient way, or the onboarding process is not a concern, because I've seen it before with drivers and then restaurants on Uber Eats. This is my first rodeo. I know how to kind of squeeze the air out of the process.
I actually hate this process doesn't scale comment. I think it's totally asinine. You're lucky if you get to a place where you can scale
where
your
that's
processes.
your problem.
Right. Like,
yeah.
It's, right now, if I go into anywhere, I'm like, do you have Spotify? Which everyone looks at me cross-eyed and says yes. And then I'm like, subscribe to my podcast. Like every single one of those people is important to me. Yeah. If hopefully this ends up being a big show, I won't be able to do that. But that's the point, is in the early days, you have to do everything possible to be high touch, learn. You're trying to find product market fit. You take in from everything that you do. Hopefully you get the benefit of being able to figure out, okay, now we need to get every driver off of our given iPhone, and maybe,
maybe have them use their own phone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So another fun one from the early days. You worked with me, which is a disaster for you. But luckily we're still friends 10, 15 years later. The fun ones that stand out are the marketing stunts we were doing. They're kind of tests in some ways. We're sort of delivering new vehicle types or food we weren't doing before. There are some learnings from that. How much that ends up informing, who knows? But certainly they're fun experiments. They're great marketing stunts. Two of them that stand out that we worked together on are limos for Lollapalooza, which probably maybe was the end of the limo as a construct. We put limos on the system during Lollapalooza, which again was my idea and I thought it was going to be a good one, but whatever. And then we did paczkis, which my Chicago accent comes out, which is a Polish pastry that you do during Lent. Basically these jelly-filled donuts that we had in boxes, and you could order them. We showed up with a car that had the boxes in there, which now sounds normal. At the time, no one did anything like that.
When it when I think back to like all of these interesting ideas and stunts that we did, people say the word tension, and I think a lot of times it has a negative connotation. I see tension as like one of the physical forces that moves teams forward. The tension in those days was the marketing team would come up with crazy ideas, lob them over to the ops team, go build this, go make this happen.
Figure it out.
And it was always, okay, is it going to be worth it? And it always was worth it. If nothing else, they were huge learning opportunities for us. They were ways to get out in the community, connect with people that might not need transportation, but expose them to the Uber brand. And they were always newsworthy too, which was a great way to continue to drive brand awareness. But yeah, the limos and Lollapalooza thing, I remember spending like 2 whole weeks all day, every day, getting this was Max's mandate, get every single limo, stretch limo,
white
Escalade,
limo.
white limo, pink limo, every single limo in Chicago needs to be on the Uber platform to be ordered by Lollapalooza goers. We did it, and busted our asses in the process. Got them all on, and we're like, all right, let's light it up. Back in the day, the Uber app was like the slider at the bottom, and you could slide between taxi, UberX, black car, and then limo was like the next button over that would pop up during Lollapalooza.
Limo or something.
And like, unfortunately, not many people were sliding the slider all the way over to limo. That Lolla, and I think it had worked on a smaller scale the prior year, and you're like, so let's blow it up this year. So we're like, wow, we paid all these limo drivers, we prepaid them or incentivized them. We're like, what could we do to at least keep them busy? Because right now they're just like sitting around twiddling their thumbs while people are not taking limos to Lollapalooza. We had this technology on the back end that allowed us to what was called cross dispatch. You could say, all right, make limos available to anyone who orders regular Uber Black or Uber Taxi or UberX. Well, we're supply constrained on these cheaper options during Lolla. Let's just make limos available so that they could actually just do some rides and supplement the supply constraints that we had on UberX. We did that, and people were not happy. We had one person write in, newsflash, when you order an UberX to take to a dentist appointment, when a pink stretched limo shows up, it is not a moment of surprise and delight. I mean, maybe for some people it would be, but this person, it was not. I'm just trying to go to the dentist today and a pink stretched limo shows up. What the heck? Lessons learned. Again, the big swings were totally worth it. And it was always about putting something out there, seeing what stuck, learning, iterating, and doing it better the next time.
It's a careful balance, but I think you need to also have the humility. Hopefully I have a little bit, which is to be able to say, hey, we tried something. Thanks for busting your asses to get all these limos on. It didn't work. Why didn't it work? Okay, let's all take note of that. Let's inform the next time we do this. And then build a culture that people still feel like, hey, let's try the next thing. And even if that one won't work out. But it was always iterative in that way. And that was some of the magic of the culture that's hard to replicate, where people were down to say, yeah, hey, even if this doesn't work, let's try it and let's see if we can.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you could literally just like fall flat on your face with something that you tried, as long as you had some like playbook or learnings you could write up about it, it was considered a win when everything netted out. That was really like a special part of the culture.
The theme of the podcast in a lot of ways is about early employees. Sometimes it's missed that employees are owners too. And, we had the cultural mandate value at Uber of be an owner, not a renter, but that you do own the business and you do own what you do that day and you can make an impact on the company. And I think that gets lost with a lot of people that are working at a company versus, hey, I'm not, the boss or the CEO or
yeah, this isn't my lane that I'm supposed to be. I'm like, get out of here with the lanes. We are all here trying to grow this thing. You need to be able to like switch into different lanes, wear all the hats, do whatever it takes, even if you haven't ever done it before. That's the hard part and the fun part about building early stage startup teams, is like finding people who can actually do that.
We touched on Fellow a bit before, but what was kind of the journey to being a CEO now? You fundraised. How much have you raised? Really wild to watch you, probably looking for, there's also a theme in the podcast, people kind of looking for the high post Uber. I know you've advised companies, you've invested, you've helped incubate things, you've worked at companies. Now you're the CEO of a really fast growing startup. What's that journey been like?
Yeah, I think in all my roles, I kept getting kind of like closer and closer to like the person in charge. I've been surrounded by amazing people, and over the years just feel like I kind of have amassed all the different skills to put in my little toolkit to take my stab at it. When I think about kind of chasing the Uber high, what did I love about Uber? And I think a lot of people think about pinnacle, the success, that IPO day, or, whatever, the peak valuation that Uber had as being the thing that you're chasing. And I think for me, it's chasing that feeling of like the 7 days a week, the onboarding the drivers one by one, the building with people who are awesome. Like that's what I'm chasing. And I think that stepping in as CEO, there's a lot of awesome opportunities that present themselves in this role. But the thing that gets me most excited is building another team that's super close, collaborative, fierce, passionate, has the do whatever it takes mentality. So that's kind of what I'm focused on at Fellow. Fellow is an app that connects you with someone who's overcome a challenge that you might be facing. It's a peer-to-peer marketplace. We're still in the very early days of like grinding it out. And I literally ask myself every day, okay, what can I do to get one more check-in? Our check-ins are our version of trips, of rides. What can I do to get one more check-in on our platform today? And that comes with like, I'll reach out to customers directly. Hey, saw you did a check-in last week. Like, how did it go? Do you want to chat with that fellow again? Or could we help you find a different one to try? So rolling our sleeves up and not having any task too big or small, to make it work is sort of the place we're at right now.
And I know you don't want to be pigeonholed as anything, but you are also a working mom, 2 kids. What is that like now being the CEO of a company plus that? How do you balance everything? It's
so hard. And I'm so tired and I drink way too much coffee. But it's also so rewarding. And I will say, one of the things that I've found since Uber is I've really wanted to work on products or at companies that I use and that I want to have exist in the world, because that is just like fuel for my fire. And working on something like Fellow, which I think is unequivocally good for the world, is awesome. And my kids are 6 and 4 now, and they're to an age where I can explain to them what I do. I show them the app and they get it. And I overheard my son explaining to someone what his mom's job was. And he said, she has an app that helps people. And I'm like, okay, like something is good. There's something good that's going to come out of this. And I think, for me, it's if I can work on something that makes a positive impact that my kids can be really proud of, they wear their Fellow swag to school and it's pretty cool. In the meantime, I think I want to lead by example and show them, not just tell them, hey, you can grow up to be anything you want, but like actually show them what it looks like to grow up to be anything you want. That's kind of the goal. All
right. Well, you are wildly impressive, not surprising, but wildly impressive. And how can people find more information about Fellow?
Go to myfellow.app or follow me on LinkedIn. I try to kind of keep everyone updated on the latest and greatest.
All right. Well, you are amazing. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks, Max. This was fun.